talking, sorry.
You're very welcome.
Do I have to recuse myself on the, apply again to colleges as PAL.
I'm going to call the meeting to order at this time. It is 7 p.m., November 5th. We have a quorum, and we are being recorded and broadcast by Minuteman Media Network. When you address the board, if you would come forward, identify yourself and your street address. We'll move on to the consent agenda, the town accountant warrants, gift acceptance from Concord Carlisle Community Chest, Inc., $8,500 to the school resource officer account, Sunday entertainment licenses, development strategy consultants, November 11th, 18th, and 25th from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., 57 Ornac Theater, one-day special licenses, Mahoney's Garden Center, November the 8th from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., 1625 Sudbury Road, wine only. Development Strategy Consultants, November 8, 9, 10, 15, 16, and 17 from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., 57 Ornac Wine and Malt. And November 11 and 17, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., 57 Ornac Wine and Malt.
Move to approve the consent agenda as read, although I believe the second date for development strategies is 11/18.
18, is that, did I say something else?
Maybe I heard
Whatever it is, the 18th.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Town manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Relative to the storm last Saturday night, we had a lot of heavy rain and wind. Brought down a bunch of trees, including a 50-inch diameter tree on Virginia Road. Luckily, the power wasn't knocked out because the utilities are underground. There were limited power outages around town, and the Public Works Department was out all day clearing drains and removing tree debris. Police chief and the Public Works director planning to commission a traffic study, an evaluation of different intersections where the turning movements have been requested to restrict traffic into local neighborhoods in about 30 to 40 locations. So they hope to have the consultant on board within the next couple of weeks and it'll be a comprehensive review so that we're not pushing traffic from one neighborhood onto the adjoining neighborhood.
That will certainly upset ways.
Yes, and when they do make recommendations, when we posted those signs, no left turn, that did show up on the apps.
Yeah.
So, the parking lots on Cottage Road and Walden Street are mostly completed. The lines have been painted. Only the bio-retention swales have not been completed. The plants wouldn't do well over the winter, so they'll wait till the spring to plant the plants in those areas. The USS Thomas Hudner will be commissioned on December 1st in honor of former late Captain Thomas Hudner of Concord, who was awarded the Medal of Honor. And the Independent Battery has requested to move the cannon on November 26th, 28th, and December 1st to honor for different celebrations on Thomas Hudner. Veterans Day is Sunday, November 11th. Town offices will be closed on Monday, the 12th. A flag retirement ceremony will be held on the 11th at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. The public is welcome to bring their own worn flags to retire. The ceremony starts at 7:45 a.m. At Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Federal election day is tomorrow. Of course, the polls open at 7 and will close at 8 p.m. In 10 days of early voting that took place, ending last Friday, 3,087 residents voted early, about 24% of registered voters. Participants seem pleased in the convenience of being able to vote earlier. The Historic District will host a public meeting on Wednesday, November 14th to discuss expanding the Historic District. And I think individual notices have gone to residents whose homes are under consideration for inclusion, and as well as the public is invited. Let's see. Cafe Nero has completed its health inspection and is scheduled to open before Thanksgiving, so in the next few weeks on Main Street.
Well, I did peek in. They certainly have got all their stuff.
So it'll be open soon. They didn't have a specified date. And then again on November 18th, the Thoreau Farm and Gainey Ground are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the preservation of the Thoreau Farm and establishment of the Thoreau Farm Trust. Thank you.
Parking lots, the lighting will be in.
The lighting is on back order, so they did select a pole that's not too tall, so it won't disperse the light wide, farm-wide, and they were delayed ordering it. So the lights will be installed in the spring. In the meantime, the old lights are still in place. So
Oh, okay, so there will be lighting.
those have not been taken down until the new lighting is in.
And Chris, do you have any update on the timing for the West Concord curve?
That, end of this month, that work, the intention is to have the work done on that Comm Ave Main Street intersection curving. It will be done by the end of November, and the trail will be turned over to the town. Marcia expects there'll be a few odds and ends that need to be completed in the spring, but the public, it will be open to the public. She believes it will be in November.
Well, that's great.
Is there any way to put some kind of caution signal of some kind, even if it's temporary, in the evening? On my way over tonight, a car was actually, didn't realize that it was two-way traffic as you went around that curve coming towards Concord Center, and we were with a situation. And it is,
Until it's completed and striped, it would be helpful.
especially in this inclement weather, and it was difficult to make out what the situation was.
Okay.
And I would agree, because I've seen several cars making a left on the, towards Concord Center, which has never been allowed, but they're just sort of, and,
Okay,
so.
that's helpful. Make sure that's clear. It should be completed by the end of this month.
I know it's soon, but thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I want to just follow up to our board meeting of October 29th. The letters were sent to Aiden Edmondson and Justin Reed, congratulating them on attaining the rank of Eagle Scout. And at that meeting, the board received a preliminary report from the Affordable Housing Funding Committee regarding their recommendations. It was suggested the select board hold a meeting specifically focused on those recommendations. We've scheduled a meeting for November 13th at 5 p.m. In March of this year, Concord joined the AARP network of age-friendly communities. The network encourages communities to take action and pay increased attention to the environmental, economic, and social features that encourage greater age integration and diversity and create a community that supports residents from cradle to retirement. AARP provided $4,000 grant to assist the town with the implementation of a survey of residents over 50 to help understand the importance and availability of various amenities such as housing, transportation, activities, health services, etc. The survey can be found online at www.concordma.gov/age.friendly/survey or on paper at the town clerk's office, the planning office, or the council on aging. All responses are due back by November 21st. I want to acknowledge an excellent forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Concord Carlisle on the issue of affordable housing this past Friday morning. The forum was a discussion of the various town committees and state activities dealing with this important issue. I also want to comment on a visit to Concord from various representatives from our sister city, Nanai, Japan, and the excellent work of the Concord Nanai Committee, particularly the co-chairs Susan Curtin and John Cratchley. We are fortunate to be able to provide 3 days of relatively good weather. Wild turkeys and deer made appearances as well as the fall foliage. There was a lovely and well-attended send-off party at Joe Brock and Wade Rubenstein's house. Coming attractions, as mentioned, November 7th at the Townhouse Hearing Room at 7 p.m., the Concord Cemetery Committee, in conjunction with the Cemetery Superintendent Dan Rowley and Cemetery Supervisor Tish Hopkins, is holding a public information meeting to inform Concord residents about proposals being considered for the cemetery on the subject of gravesite supply. November 11th, the Concord Public Ceremonies and Celebrations Committee is hosting the Veterans Day flag retirement of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, which Chris has already announced. November 13th, there's a dog park feasibility study committee will hold its final public hearing at 7 p.m. at the Townhouse Hearing Room. This will be the final opportunity for citizens to express their views on the desirability of pursuing a dog park in Concord, and if so, what kind. The state and national elections occur tomorrow. Perhaps one of the best ways to honor our veterans is to exercise the right to vote. Like jury duty, voting is a precious obligation of citizenship that our veterans served and sacrificed to protect. Thank you. We'll now move to discussion of possible permanent municipal building committee.
I promised you a draft charge, and I still owe you that. So it's not going to be on the 2 pages I had last week, so I apologize for that.
Well, we've been active and busy, so I guess we can move fairly quickly then on to discussing hunting on state land at MCI Concord. This was prompted by a letter from Arthur Degasian. I believe I may not be pronouncing that correct. I don't know if he or anybody's here to, if you would like to come forward.
We have a guest from the Fish and Wildlife.
Okay.
State Fisheries Division.
Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife.
Great, would you please come forward?
Would you mind coming?
Yes, would you mind if we both come forward?
Sure, please.
This is Chalice Bird, our wildlife biologist, and the reason we're here is that we were invited by the town manager. I think it was Matthew Morrow, and we provided some information already,
If
just
you
about
would
hunting.
Start just by your name and,
Because it's being recorded.
yeah.
Righto. Patricia Huckery,
Thank you.
Northeast District Supervisor, Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. And you can introduce yourself, and I'm going to hand out some additional information.
My name's Chalice Bird. I'm the district wildlife biologist for the Northeast.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you. This was, we received this,
Yes, sir.
and we sent this, this is what you sent along, right, Andrew? First 2 pages.
How would you like to start?
Well, I guess I would just preface the remark that, as I was saying, we received an email concerning the hunting on MCI Concord land, recognizing that it is falls within the legal area that the hunting could take place, but there was some concern that with the Bruce Friedman Rail Trail, and the town has also purchased the Garreau land, that there will be more activity in the area, and whether there should be consideration of not having any hunting on that land. So if you would like
Okay,
to pick
then-
up from that point.
Then I'm just going to go through what I submitted. There were just some general information that that was requested. So it's just some facts that I have. We did receive a call, and I spoke at length with Arthur. He called about closing the MCA Concord lands to hunting, and one of the things he reported were pellets landing on 3 houses. And my note said sometime in the last 30 years. Arthur also reported that a few hunters use this property to harvest Canada geese in the fields. I believe you guys lease to a farmer, or they lease to a farmer, excuse me. And Arthur also expressed concern about the rail trail and hunting. So we just go into action whenever we hear restricting access to hunting, because it's one of the major ways we have of managing wildlife in the state of Massachusetts. And it's particularly important to talk about here in Concord, in eastern Massachusetts, where we have access to wildlife and managing deer, bear an emerging issue, deer that are already overabundant and an issue in this particular part of the state, as well as other wildlife species. I was just talking to Carlin, and she says she has 40 turkeys in her backyard, which is an extraordinary number of turkeys in our minds. So what we wanted to do was talk about hunting. We have some important information to relay, and then we're going to talk a little bit about wildlife management on a different level, not just Concord, but at a regional scale that I think that, to put it all in perspective. So as we understand, MCA Concord supports hunting on lands under their control. And I think it's important for you to look at a map that was created by our office. So it's this one like this. So this one, the rust color is 150-foot setback from paved highways. And there is a state law that also states there's a safety setback of 500 feet from an occupied dwelling. So this also shows that on here. And the green area is the dark green area are all those areas outside the 500 and 150-foot safety setbacks that could be hunted. So it just so happens this covers, if you look really closely, you can see the assessor's lines on there. They're probably not dark enough, but this upper block right here is MCI land, as we see on the assessor's maps. And this dark green area right here is what we call a huntable. So it's outside the restricted areas and is also in an area that MCI allows hunting.
Can I just have can you locate us in terms of where we're I mean, I'm having a hard time following where we are on this.
Hey, pull out another, I just gave that one to Arthur.
It's the prison.
We can share.
Oh,
Right,
okay,
that's what
let's
I
share. So,
Right, and that would be restricted. I just wanted to confirm it because it just seemed very clear.
Select Board Member Hotchkiss, did you get the answer to that question?
Well, I'm guessing.
It's this right here.
This is,
That's Warner's Pond,
The
yeah.
rail trail is north of that, right?
this is the rail trail and
Yeah.
this is Route 2?
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
Let's make sure this one's behind you. See what on the map. You guys have
you guys
questions?
need any, you know what it is?
Following any of,
We're-
do you have any more copies?
We're all neighbors of Wright Road here.
Can I steal this, Chris? Here's another one.
I want to see what you're talking about.
Sure, great.
Here.
So this is Route 2 here.
Warner's Pond, This is the 500 foot setback from occupied dwellings. And this dark green is the huntable area, so this is MCI here. And this is town conservation land, and this is Boy Scouts.
So the town conservation land is not, they don't allow hunting.
No, I know that. This was just the green, what the green represented was areas outside 500 feet in the huntable area.
I know it's there, but I'm sure.
I don't know what the Giroux is.
It's all for Commonwealth Avenue.
Yes, this is MCI.
Trail that we walk on. Yeah.
But only from this point on. So it's
Okay.
but hunting is only.
I'll just keep moving along. I think they caught up where exactly we were talking about. Okay, so,
So the dark green is hunting, huntable land?
huntable land.
Owned by the Commonwealth?
Well, it's the MCI, and they are an organization of the Commonwealth.
Yep.
Okay. So,
Jurisdiction.
what's that?
They have jurisdiction.
They have jurisdiction. And so one of the reasons that we understand MCI Concord supports hunting on their lands is that there's a farmer who grows corn in those fields, and he is in favor of goose hunting to reduce crop damage. That particular farmer also called Mass Wildlife. He called our waterfowl biologist to discuss options for helping him to control the Canada geese population that was damaging his crops. So we have that. We know that there's an issue with too many Canada geese on this property. In particular, they're resident Canada geese, which means they don't migrate and go away. They just stay there and eat all the time. So I just wanted to point out that the Canada goose season is a total of 94 days, which is 25% of the days of the year. There is a goose season September 4th, about September 4th, to September 21st, which is called the early goose season. That's to control the non-migratory population of the resident geese.
When you mean the season, that's a hunting.
Hunting season, yes. I don't think I need to read you the other ones. It's just that there are 4 different occasions during the year when Canada geese can be hunted in the central part of the waterfowl zone, and then as well as the early and late goose seasons. And those were added really to control the resident population, which we are having problems with in eastern Massachusetts. One of the top 4 species that we receive calls, problem animal calls, are deer are number 1, coyote number 2, Canada goose, maybe I'm going to do top 5, Canada goose, maybe no wild turkeys, 3rd, Canada goose maybe is in 4th position, and then we have black bear as an emerging issue. You do have reproducing black bear nearby. We are actively tracking black bear in this part of the state, so to learn more about their potential densities that they can reach in these towns here, and that's important for us to know. That's maybe that's another discussion in town.
The hunting aspect we're talking about only applies to the geese, is that correct?
Well, that's what the complaint was, but that's where we would like to, Chairman McKean, to expand it to a greater understanding of how we're managing wildlife in this particular part of the state in eastern Massachusetts. Because we think to prohibit hunting for Canada geese also prohibits hunting for white-tailed deer. You probably have in excess of 30 deer per square mile in the town of Concord, and this particular property has a lot of features that would attract white-tailed deer. We also have, was one thing else I wanted to say about white-tailed deer. So white-tailed deer, they're not an emerging issue. They have been an issue for a number of years for us in eastern Massachusetts, and that's particularly due to access issues. More and more, there are people who are moving out from the city to the suburbia and closing off their lands to hunting. And quite frankly, it takes maybe 2 acres, possibly 2 acres is a huntable portion of land. And in Concord, you have, I think there's another map in there that I wanted you to see, that this one, where all the green is, those are all the areas in Concord. You have a lot of land in Concord that could be considered huntable. It's private, it's, I don't know, it's probably town, conservation, it's town municipal land and other property. DCR has land in this particular green area, and there's also U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So our objective here is to talk about the bigger wildlife issues other than Canada geese. So we calculated that there are 40 acres of huntable land at MCI Concord based on the safety setbacks that I've already discussed with you. The 500-foot safety setback can be waived by homeowners, in particular if they're having trouble with wildlife. Let's just talk about white-tailed deer. In other towns in eastern Massachusetts, in our Chalice and Mine district, there are towns who are waiving that. People who are at the end of cul-de-sacs are getting together and they're finding hunters, and it's in order to reduce the deer herd. And they allow them to come as close as sitting on their back porches. But it starts at 500 and it could be reduced. So
deer hunting is using a rifle, whereas no, not necessarily.
would you like to talk to that about?
Yes. So, in the state of Massachusetts, you are unable to use rifles for hunting deer. So there's archery, shotgun, and muzzleloader. Those are the 3 seasons.
What's very popular with deer hunting in eastern Mass is archery, and greater than 50% of our hunters are archery hunters, and for the simple fact that it's very quiet, and a discharge of a firearm is disruptive to people, as people sitting behind me, and but that is what is used to hunt Canada geese, as I understand that they do year to year there. So I just wanted to point out this 40 acres that there's a lot of wildlife habitat. We look at, we have like, there's Google Earth, there's Mass GIS layers where we can look at habitat from the air. And so there's a lot of desirable habitats for wildlife in ecotones. There's fields and shrublands, forests and floodplain wetlands, waterways, and then there's Warner's Pond. So there's probably abundant wildlife in this particular area. Now, I did make a mistake on number 7. I did say the town of Concord. I received some information from the town about hunting on municipal lands. And what I stated here was that lands are open in Concord to hunting with written permission from the selectmen, but those are not the lands that are in the care, control, and custody of the Conservation Commission. So there's municipal lands, like water department lands or other lands like that, and then there's conservation lands. And Delia Kay, your conservation agent, did send me and correct that. And I just wanted to point out, I do understand that the Conservation Commission lands, the choice in Concord was to restrict hunting, trapping, bow hunting, and discharge of a firearm on conservation lands. I attached a sheet on the information of hunting incidents in up to 2007. It's compiled by our hunter education program at Mass Wildlife. And I just want to point out a couple of things on that because I think it's important that we talk about level of risk. And one of the things that we're becoming concerned about at Mass Fish and Wildlife is that people are conflating hunting with some of the horrible things that are happening in the country today with people discharging firearms in churches and so forth. So there was, I think you all have that in your packet. So we have over 71,000 licensed hunters in the state. And I'm just going to cut to the quick. There's never been a non-hunter fatality in the state of Massachusetts. There has been a fatality of a hunter. It was a tragic situation in Hampton, Mass. in 2005. A father and son were hunting with each other, and a firearm discharged as they were walking together, and unfortunately the father shot his son. So that's in 30 years of reporting accidents. Non-hunters are, there's 3 incidents that were in a 30-year period of reporting where a non-hunter was, they felt the shot from a shotgun. There's a second case in Norton in 2011 where a dog walker was injured, and then there's a third case in 2014 which involved a jogger in Hyannis. I will point out no fatal accidents with non-hunters.
Any statistics as to whether whether dogs or any other animals have been accidentally shot?
Chairman, we don't track that. We're mostly interested in impacts to humans.
There's fair concern about impact to dogs in Concord, so I'm just curious.
Well, one of the things that, and I'm just going to stay on this particular sheet because there's a lot of information on here that is valuable for you to understand risk. And so we have a hunter education program in Massachusetts, and new hunters and other young, like adults that are coming into hunting, they all are required to take a hunter education class, and it's between 12 and 18 hours of education that they have to attend these classes, and this is a standard curriculum that's used across the country. Part of hunting regulations, and our hunting regulations in this state are thick, and we could spend days discussing just one species and how it's managed in this state. But will I point out?
Is there an age restriction for a license?
Yes, age 17. And then they are also required not only to get a hunter education certificate, but they have to obtain a license to carry or yes, thank you, an FID from the local police department. We have youth hunts and we're younger. 15 to, there's 14, 15, 16-year-olds are allowed to hunt at youth hunts. We have a youth turkey hunt, we have a youth deer hunt, we have a youth pheasant hunt. And in those instances, they are always required to be with an adult, a responsible adult who carries a license and also has their firearms ID. So in our hunting regulations, the use of blaze orange has been an extraordinary addition. It's a mandatory hunter orange requirement, and that nationally has caused any incidents in other states, and we've really never had a problem here, but it reduces the number of hunting incidents in other states.
Is that required at all times, or are there portions of the hunt where camouflage gear is allowed?
Yes, when you're hunting turkey, they'll key in on that color, and so yeah, turkey hunters you probably will not see. They are completely covered. So I think what I wanted to point out there's basic safe gun handling habits that hunters are taught to abide by, and there's a card that we receive when we pass hunter education, and it's like the 10 Commandments. And one of the most important things I wanted to point out is before shooting, you are correctly identifying your game and you know what is behind it. And that's pretty much that's a law that we all have to follow as we hunt. And so I don't think that many dogs, and we certainly aren't getting those calls, and I think we would get those calls. And we also don't get calls that horses are being shot either. We we don't record it, but we're not getting them. And then let me go back to this page, make sure I covered that. I did talk to you about there's other implications when you're closing a piece of land to hunting, and other than just a few Canada goose hunters, and it has to do with deer and black bear. And like I said, deer are a major issue, and we do need to continue to have as much access as possible to harvest those deer. And the only way they are being harvested is during the regulated hunting season. The only other source of mortality would be for a deer is for it to be struck by a vehicle, and vehicle collisions. I don't know what your vehicle collisions in the town of Concord are, but I imagine there's significant since you have Route 2 that goes through and you have agricultural fields on both sides. And your police chief might keep track of that kind of thing if you were interested in finding that out. Deer are also an issue when it comes to tick-borne disease, and I don't really need to elaborate on that. High number of white-tailed deer means high number of ticks, and there's also an issue that's even more important to us, and it's that what we're recording, and what we recorded in Concord was there's deer herbivory, meaning they eat the landscape, they eat the forest, they eat the shrubs, they eat everything within deer height. And we did, and I think I did not include this in your report, the full thing, but I did want to show you, we have been in your town doing deer browse surveys, and we did, yes, there were, and you can see the color scheme, and the important thing to note from this is that the forest, these are deer browse surveys that we did in the town of Concord on these parcels that have some color to them. And so from the colors range from green, where there's little to no impact from deer browse, to a level of 7, which is heavily impacted. So there are, some of these are just, these properties are moderately impacted. You could see the up near Estabrook Woods, it's really a 6 on a scale of 7. And I don't know what the heck is going on at Tanner's Brook, but that's red hot with deer. And what you see that's something that we've documented already in Concord that we would like to continue to be able to access those deer and reduce the numbers. So that's an important map for you to see. I don't think, do you guys have that map? Okay, all right, good.
That's over in Lincoln.
Oh, okay, yes, I went over town line. There we go. Yep.
I'm just trying to figure out why I hadn't heard of it. Well, I was trying to remember hiking it.
And if you want more information on that, we can give it to you. Sometimes the browse surveys, they're about 6 or 7 pages long, and I didn't think that was something that you needed to go over at this point, but we could discuss it at a later time. My point number 11, I'm going to repeat this again. This town we have an overabundant deer population in Concord and the surrounding towns. At 20 deer per square mile, there are ecological impacts. That is in the literature, and it's especially impact species in the understory, like birds, small and mesomammals, turtles, amphibians, snakes, insects. Let's not leave them off. Pollinators. So what we're interested in is the ecology of the forest. And what we did document in the pictures in the report for Estabrook Woods was interesting in that when deer overbrowse, you can see the browse line, and you can see that there's no regenerating oak. There's no regenerating sugar maple or red maple. The trees are all above deer munching height. And what happens is that from that disturbance, they become fern glades. And once the fern glades establish themselves, it's really difficult to get the understory of the forest back. And there's some pictures of the fern glades at Estabrook Woods, that area up there. I wanted to let you know that and you may already know this, but there are numerous towns and conservation organizations that we've been working with over the last probably 8 to 10 years who are opening conservation lands and municipal lands to manage the burgeoning deer population. I'm going to just list a few of them. The town of Weston is in their 4th year of a archery hunt for deer. The town of Dover has set up the same, more or less the same hunt. North Andover's been doing it for a number of years. Sudbury was one of the towns that started it probably 15 years ago. They were way ahead of the game. Mass Audubon we're working with, they had to start opening up some of their properties. Ipswich River Wildlife Sanctuary, what they did is they studied it first, and what they did is they set up exclosures that deer couldn't enter, and then they monitored the vegetation inside and outside. And being a bird conservation organization, they implemented an archery program at Ipswich River Wildlife Sanctuary, as well as at Moose Hill, which is in Sherborne, the Sherborne area. The trustees of reservations has properties open to hunting. So does Sudbury Valley trustees. In Essex County, we have the Essex County Greenbelt Association, and they also have hunting on their properties. And so the move is to gain access, but not lose access unnecessarily. And then, so we do work with a lot of nonprofit organizations, town, state, federal agencies. We work with towns like Concord, especially in eastern Massachusetts, to keep lands open to hunting. And this really is to manage the social and biological carrying capacity of the wildlife species that reside in these areas. And what we know is that wildlife is more adaptable than we ever thought. Black bear are moving in and doing quite well. They love bird feeders. We have evidence of them in Littleton, Westford, Harvard, Bolton, Pepperell. Thinking of towns around here, Carlisle. Oh, and I needed to add Carlisle to that list of towns. Carlisle has been discussing opening their conservation lands literally for almost 10 years, and it shouldn't. But they're doing it. And I go to that town every single year, and I do a Carlisle conservation breakfast, and we talk about wildlife issues, and one that always comes up is deer. So I'm very, very, very happy that they're making the move to do an archery hunt in Carlisle. They have a lot of open space that's huntable. And then, this last point, I don't know that I just think it's going to be interesting for you to know. I don't know if you know about the locavore movement, but more people, and what we're seeing is more people want to hunt in their backyards, and they want to get their own game, and they want to get their own turkey and their own deer, and bears are problematic in eastern Mass at this point. and they want to get their own game, and so they're working in their own neighborhoods, and that's going on now, and that has to do with the farmers markets. I mean, you could see it happening. People want to buy locally, they want to eat locally, and this is about as local as it gets. And venison is a fine that's fine food to put on your table. I just thought you should know that that's happening, and we're sort of tracking that as it expands. And that's all that I really had in here. I just want to go through and make sure I didn't miss anything in my pile of stuff. Oh, I put in here three living with wildlife fact sheets, and one of them was for Canada goose, because we do receive a lot of calls on that. Of course, white-tailed deer is in there, and any of these are available off our website, masswildlife.org. And then, of course, the lovely black bear. And that concludes my comments, unless Chalice, you have a few things you would like to add?
No, I believe.
We covered it? Did I cover it? Okay, good. Any questions?
When you allow hunting in the town, does the town get any funding as a result of the license?
No, you get a free service. You get a hunter to come and reduce your deer herd. That's one of the things. And the hunters pay for, they're paying for their license.
Paying the state.
They pay us for the license. They pay for their FID or LTC. They're paying state enforcement office for that. They pay Bass Pro for all their gear. They spend they can spend over $1,000 for a bow, at least that much for a shotgun. So they're putting money back into the economy. And I wish I'd brought that. Do any of you get Mass Wildlife, our quarterly journal? Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're gonna make sure you got.
They part of their license purchase, it goes directly towards land management and habitat management for wildlife, not just game species, but endangered species, threatened, and special concern. So a plethora of all wildlife. The people who are purchasing their license.
Who manages the money that goes through this?
So it's Mass Wildlife, and that's also matched with or coupled with Pittman Robertson funds. So federally as well goes back for
But if
Massachusetts.
some of it came to the towns, you might have more receptive towns.
Well, that's the first we've ever been asked that question, and I think it's a real privilege to be able to hunt and take a game animal. Both Chalice and I, we hunt for our own game, and but we're not here to. We're just here to bring as many facts as possible to the table, and we want to try to make sure that we can manage some of these species going forward. I don't believe we have enough money to support 170 people that manage wildlife across the state, and I doubt, Chairman, that we're going to have any to give to towns. So I would just say that hunters do provide a service. I think the hunters at the MCI Concord, there's a few of them. I think there probably should be more because they have a serious Canada goose problem. That they're doing a service for the farmer, a free service, and that's exactly what the deer hunters are doing, and that's how some of these towns feel. They bring them in, and they will not have a hunter come on unless they get their game. They don't want people to just come and sit in a tree stand and not reduce their local deer population.
How in the towns that are participating, how do you establish, because a lot of the lands that you're looking at are also favored hiking areas, favored as Chairman McKean pointed out, hiking with your dogs. And I would imagine that the time frame during the daylight hours of hunting and the overlap with hiking would be pretty significant. How do you keep that?
There's just, it happens all the time. There are conservation lands, there are wildlife management areas where we have people who like to go out and look at the butterflies and look at their nectaring plants, and they record that for us, and they're active during hunting seasons. It's very important to understand that hunters are not out to do anything other than to get their game.
I'm not suggesting that, I'm saying it's a public
It is.
Of
It is, and which is why I brought the hunting statistics, because it just doesn't bear out the fear that people have isn't borne out, and I don't think I really covered, because there was a question about the rail trail. So I just want to, hunting and rail trails coexist throughout the state without incident. They're just hunters. I'm reviewing a rail trail in the town of Groton and Townsend. It's the Squannacook River Rail Trail, and we, the Mass Wildlife, we own a significant number of acres directly abutting. Historically, hunters have used that railway to access hunting lands. They have their camo, they have their firearm, and then they cross over, or they walk along it and cross into our property, and they hunt wildlife. So one of the key things that we have talked about with that rail trail proposal is that there needs to be signage. Just signage needs to be put up that, it's hunting season, it's deer hunting season, and we're going to have a board, and people will know that it's going on. So when they see a hunter, they're not going to be surprised or fearful. We hope that puts that fear aside. And on that, what was a key about that particular, the Squannacook River Rail Trail, was that they received money from the state. They have a 99-year lease with the MBTA, so the MBTA has given them, and that's a financial assistance, and they've also allowed them to remove the rails to, I guess there's a lot of money in rails. They're fairly heavy, so that's financial assistance for them. So when there's financial assistance, there's the use by the public is quite broad. There isn't really a restriction happening on any rail trail that we're aware of where the trail accesses huntable lands. I mean, some of the Bay Circuit Trail runs through cities and towns. No one is hunting there. No one. It's where they're accessing huntable lands, or they're huntable lands along the rail trail. And we don't believe it was the governor's idea that, fund or Mass DOT to fund rail trails because to cut a user group out. And what else did I have on that? I think that's it. So, did I miss something?
I would like to add to that. Being an avid hiker myself and a hunter, and growing up in the Berkshires, where there's a lot of both, I'm very familiar with that exact circumstance. It is very common practice in the Berkshires during shotgun season to wear hunter orange. It's not necessary for the most part. If there's a lot of hiking going on, the hunter's going to try to avoid that spot because it's going to be decreased success of harvesting an animal. You also have to put yourself in a hunter's shoes for a moment. And remember, when you're going to harvest an animal, you're not just going to shoot at the animal. You have to wait till the animal comes close enough where you can actually target the vitals. So you're not even looking at the broad area of an animal, you're looking for a target size this big of the animal. So it's very, very selective. So it's pretty common, and I've been with hunters before who I've actually hiked underneath, and they're like, I saw you a little while ago hiking underneath me.
You're talking about tree stand?
Tree stand, yeah, and he was in archery, so it's not unusual, especially out west where there's a lot of land to hike and a lot of land to hunt.
So I'm wondering, just maybe it's a follow-up to Jane's line of interest. Does Mass Wildlife have any public education materials for non-hunters to allow communities like us to be able to let people know the do's and don'ts of hiking or riding your bike during hunting season, or wear yellow or orange, or have you ever developed those kinds of materials that you could provide to communities?
I think Chalice hit it on the nose. One of the things that we tell most communities is when you're out walking in the woods, wear hunter orange. It's very visible. There's a video that you can click on when you that's on this one sheet this attachment I gave you regarding hunting incidents, and you can see where hunter orange is very visible. And I wear it whether I'm hunting or not hunting, because if I fall in the woods and twist my ankle, it might be easier, for someone to see me. So the only thing we're advising them is to wear hunter orange. And then on our website, we also have, there's an abbreviated section of this hunting and fishing guide. Like there's multiple pages in here for each species and seasons and bag limits and so forth. But there's an abbreviated version of that towns have started to use. They just make a copy of it. It shows all the seasons, and it's just in a small table all pulled together in one place. And I often ask towns to just go ahead and post that in their kiosk, and then people know.
Yeah, there's plenty of areas where it's open to hiking and hunting, and sometimes they'll put the seasons, the seasonal dates for hunting on there, and just as a notice, wear hunter orange if you feel comfortable with that.
Those change from year to year, or are they always the
Yeah,
same?
they're generally the same, but the dates change based on the day of the week, Monday and Saturday and things like that, but generally roughly the same.
And what about the use of vehicles? Because I know ATVs, different, for instance, in fishing, some fishing, I think about White Pine, it's been, with the Mass Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, there's boat access there.
Yes.
And I think it's been restricted to very low level motors, if a motor's out there.
Speed limit.
Speed
Yes.
limit, et cetera.
Yep.
I'm thinking now about rail trails, ATV, access points, and we tend to restrict a lot of that, if not all of that, in most of Concord land. I'm curious as to whether hunting and
Well, on all of our properties, motorized vehicles are prohibited unless it's for research purposes, and we'll give a special permit for that, or if it's us going about our management duties.
I'd like to hear from the neighbors.
Yeah, I have a couple of quick questions, hopefully. One is, I'm assuming that not all shots with an arrow are fatal to the animal, and the animal, on certain percentage of the time, sort of escapes and then suffers a relatively unpleasant experience. And is there any heightened risk to automobiles of an animal which has been shot by an arrow but not killed, staggering into the road?
That's not the vehicle collision data that we're receiving from the environmental police or state police.
Do you get any sense of what percent, is there any studies of what percent of the bow and arrow shots are fatal to the animal versus non-fatal?
Yeah, I think that's a very hard. It's very hard to determine. A lot of hunters, will try to get really close to the animals, and I'd say most of them are fatal shots. There's always going to be, that every hunter is going to experience the time where it's a non-fatal shot, and it breaks your heart as a hunter. It really does, because that's not why you're out there. But to determine whether an animal has died from that shot or lived from that shot is really hard. Sometimes you can follow the animal and try to track the animal as long as you can, and the blood has just disappeared, and it might have just stopped bleeding, and it might die in a few days, or it might just be fine, and you might have just brushed it. The deer might have jumped, or the animal might have moved, and you just might have skinned it a little bit. But it's hard to determine. That's in our harvest data. That is actually put into it as well in the data, is the assumption that there is going to be death without actual take of the animal.
And
It's pretty low.
I know a lot of the golf courses have problems with the geese. They use dogs to just scare the geese away, and if the geese are harassed enough, they don't come back. You ever try that with the farmers?
Well, some of these farm fields are huge. So these are really big fields that are here, and so it's quite expensive for golf courses that have more funds to hire people with dogs. So it's pricey. It's pricey for a farmer to take that up. So farmers often do invite hunters in to help produce all the wildlife species that are eating their crops. Farmers also have what we call Chapter 131, Section 37 rights. So outside the hunting season, they can also, the farmer or someone who works for the farmer can take wildlife that's damaging his crops or her crops.
And I will add to that, when you're pushing wildlife, you're not dissipating the problem. You're just moving the problem somewhere else. So it's not actually fixing anything if you're just moving the wildlife. So the best thing is to harvest. And as our agency, we see wildlife as a renewable, sustainable resource to all of us. And as soon as we start treating it like a nuisance animal, it takes away that importance of that species. Not only for other wildlife, but for us as well. It takes away the value. So I think it's important to be able to utilize it and not to let it get to a point where it's becoming what we see as a nuisance.
And I know that this has been a discussion of hunting, but I understand it's a discussion of hunting because you're trying to control populations that are having impact. And there are other methods that other places have used to control populations. Has that ever had any use?
Yeah, so there are some other methods that are great for certain places. I'm assuming you're thinking of sterilization, birth control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that has shown to work on isolated areas like islands where there's no immigration or emigration of species or the individuals, I should say, of a species. But when it comes to an area like this, where there's constant immigration, emigration, movement of individuals from herd to herd, it's impractical, unfortunately. It's hard to target the animals. It's huge costs. And then again, you're seeing that animal as a nuisance and not as a renewable, sustainable resource. So it goes against mass wildlife view of all wildlife, all treating the whole ecosystem. Again, that would take many years down the line because you have to keep giving sterilization.
50 years ago, deer were a rare species. Well, that obviously changed dramatically. We also lost major predators. Wolf is not here to manage. Neither is eastern cougar. So those were two major predators that also they killed deer, and we don't have those sources of mortality anymore. And I don't think that we want to necessarily reintroduce either one of those species to a populated state like Massachusetts. So the substitute is hunting the populations, and we create seasons that it's the best time to hunt those animals, meaning they're not raising young primarily, or the pelts are prime, so people can gain income from that. And I guess I also wanted to add about sterilization or birth control. That is, it's also used like in zoos, another contained herd, yeah. So that can be done then. And I will tell you that once we do deer studies, and we did do a deer study, and it was mainly conducted in Carlisle many years, maybe 15 years ago now. And those deer really end up being pretty smart. Like, you can get a collar on them once, but you can't get close to them again. And so with with contraceptives, you have to repeatedly find the animal and administer the contraceptive. And then in Massachusetts, it's illegal. It's not illegal. And if it was, one of the problems is that people are out there harvesting a lot of deer, and we don't want them eating meat that has, hormones in it.
Anybody else? So, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's very-
You're welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Put us on the list to get the magazine.
And I have done that, and Chalice and I also just wanted to end by saying, if you need us for anything else, we're willing to talk about. We have a lot of experience in wildlife management, town by town, and so we can help you with those issues as you see fit. So thank you for inviting us.
Now, if anybody, the neighbors would like to make some comments or come forward, we'd be interested in hearing from you.
I don't know how I became the spokesperson here.
Everybody else stood back.
I think it's because I've been emailing with the town manager, Chris, and
First,
so I.
for the record, just identify yourself.
I'm Arthur Yajin, 115 Wright Road, Concord, Massachusetts. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is a blow-up of what Pat just showed you to try to explain from our point of view what's going on. And we of course, I can't speak for everybody, but I think I will anyway, but we appreciate what mass wildlife does. And I can imagine with the shootings going on in this country that you must get people calling in hysterically and making your job very difficult. But what we feel is that, and I know the deer population is a problem, and again, appreciate, I mean, you're our representative, you try to keep the land enjoyable for us to use. And we're appreciative of that. But we feel that this is an exceptional case that is not going to interfere with your goals at Mass Wildlife. So I just wanted to explain to.
Why don't you have a seat? We all have.
Oh, yeah, but I have to point out though that, so here's the end of Wright Road, and if you go 500 feet, you go like that. This is the area where the hunters are. Part of that is farmland where they plant corn. Okay, so there are about 3 issues here. One is the hunters are supposed to stay out of this region, but in fact they sometimes come into that region. Okay, and I think that they were probably there when a couple of years ago the pellets landed on the roof. Now I don't know if that's the only time that happened. Maybe it's happened many times in the last 30 years, but it was kind of alarming, and maybe they'll talk about that. So that's the first issue. Hunters are supposed to stay out of that area. They don't always. This is a very popular trail here. I mean, we have so many dog walkers going in there. In fact, most of us don't like it that much. The last few years, the professional dog walkers have just, used that all the time. But my wife and I, we get our exercise along with many other people by about every other day we walk around through the loop. But during hunting season, we won't do that, okay? Because I know the percentages are way down, In fact, I looked up the statistics. There's about 300 to 500 non-hunters hurt by hunters a year in the U.S. 10% of that is fatal. Okay. Now, about 300 people or so a year are struck by are injured by lightning. Again, about 10% of that is fatal. So I know that my chances of being hit by lightning is not very strong. But I'm telling you, if I'm out there with my lawnmower and there's a lightning storm, those statistics don't help me. I'm running back in the house. In the same way, when I go there and in September, and boom, 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 you know, my wife and I, we just get frightened and we just stay out. We just don't go there from, you know, end of September to December. Because I have seen them. I grew up on a farm. And my father allowed hunting on the farm until the area got too populated. Then he posted no hunting signs, and this was in Seacon. So I understand, and I still go today with my chainsaw, and I keep that path clean. Okay, so I understand what Mass Wildlife is wanting to do, to keep recreation areas, to keep the land in use, and so on. But I think this is an exception because of that. Because of this 500 feet that they don't always honor, and now you've got this Garreau Park and this trail. So, you know, it leaves only a few acres in here where they can hunt if they do stay in that area. And, you know, the bottom line for me is that I don't think it's going to affect populations, and even the geese. There are thousands of geese. I can't see how the hunters even get a few geese will affect it. But just imagine for yourselves if hunting is legal there, where it's 500 feet away and 150 feet from the road. There's no legal status to a rail trail. There should be. Most people think there should be, but there isn't. It's not on the books. So, okay. So, just imagine if this were a no hunting area right now. You know, I know myself, and I think most people would look at that and you said, now we want to make that a hunting area. Well, all the people that are going to be here, the people walking in here, people at the end of Wright Road, I think they'd say, you're out of your mind. You shouldn't make that a hunting area. But I do not think this will affect the population of the animals that Pat and her colleague are worried about. And I'm happy to learn the general principles of what Mass Wildlife is doing in the rest of the state.
Anybody else like to?
My name is Erin Fife, and I am a former resident of Wright Road. I moved last year. I lived on Wright Road for 7 years. I have 2 young children, a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Excuse me, where do you live now?
I live on Hill Street. And in the 7 years that I lived on Wright Road, every year we had incidences of either hearing hunters or having birdshot enter the backyards of the houses on Wright Road. I know of 5 houses that were hit with birdshot, one of which was last year when it hit 118 Wright Road, and they have a 2-year-old, and they happened to be outside at the time and were incredibly concerned. They had birdshot hit their roof and also some of the trees in their yard. We recognize that the farmers' fields are heavily covered with geese, and you know, I can imagine the farmer is incredibly concerned about that. One of our issues is that the houses on Wright Road are not visible from the fields. And as Arthur said, there's you know, a lot of evidence that shows that hunters are not staying in that, out of that 500-foot setback. We talked with Lori Capone last year and got no hunting signs posted on all the town's property around Warner's Pond and along Wright Road and on all of that, but it has not stopped the hunting, which leads us to believe that there are hunters that are coming from the state lands closer to the house. So, you know, as a compromise, and I don't think we're here to necessarily talk about solutions, but even getting something posted at the 500-foot setback line that says there are houses ahead, please do not shoot in this direction. I think that would potentially be a first step to helping prevent some of this conflict.
I believe, Pat, did you want to respond?
I just wanted to point out,
If you come
Aaron,
forward, I'm sorry, we are being taped, and so we do like to have everybody heard.
hi Aaron.
Nice to meet you.
I just wanted to point out to Aaron that we actually do have 500-foot safety setback signs. They're bright hunter orange, and we would be glad to post those there. Yeah, we would do that,
Right.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, come forward.
Hi. My name is Mike McDonald. I live at 208 Wright Road. I like to think of it as the forward operating base on Wright Road because I'm at the very last house right on that conservation land. So I'm the closest to Route 2 and the closest to the hunting lands. I also have two 8-year-old children. And the first time we heard those gunshots, they both came running into my bedroom and said, "Daddy, are those guns?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "What are people doing shooting so closely to our house?" I said, "Well, there's hunting allowed." Right there. Look closely, you can see one of them. And if you look closely at the map, you'll see that one of the more populated trails now, which Arthur was referring to, runs right through that hunting land. We walk it every single day. We have a dog. We bring our two 8-year-old children there. There are other children. There are people that come from out of town to use that trail. It's posted as a popular dog walking trail. So people are coming from out of town to use that trail. This is not a Second Amendment issue. This is not an issue of whether it's a 500-foot radius or a 200-foot radius or a 150-foot setback. This is purely and simply a reasonable safety issue. Is this the right place to allow hunting?
Is it posted to the 500-foot area at all?
No, what hunters do is they have range finders, and I think it's a problem if hunters are hunting within 500 feet of occupied dwellings, and there's recourse for that if it is with the environmental police. So,
Would you mind coming up here?
yep.
Just so you can be heard on television.
Oh, I'm sorry. I always think I'm loud enough for everything. Chairman, so what hunters do before they go out hunting is they look at all the mapping tools that are available to them, or they know the area in which they are hunting. Because they have to follow the 10 commandments of hunting based on their hunter education training. So they will make mistakes, I guess, from time to time. The 500-foot safety setback is for discharge of a shotgun, so if they aren't operating 500 feet away, we're going to make sure that that happens from here on out. We also have we have an environmental police force that can be called. It's a 1-800 number, the radio room, if they are closer. And did I answer your question?
Well, I was just curious whether there was any type of, you're now within 500 feet of some sort of a marking of some type.
Well, there's the 500 foot safety setback, but hunters can walk through that in order to get to a huntable area. So, and I think they frequently do. They walk.
I guess my point is if you're hunting and you're following something, and you're 510 feet, fine, but how do you know the difference when you cross that 500-foot line?
Well, most hunters know when they use range finders, so they know where the houses are, and they're usually hunting areas that they're quite familiar with. Whether it's 501 or 499, it's as close as they possibly can get it. And if they are hunting closer, you just have recourse. You call 1-800 and get the environmental police out.
And we've done that on numerous occasions. And what we're told is that they have no jurisdiction over that. They have no jurisdiction to allow or disallow hunting. That's really up to the owner of the state property, which in this case is Mr. Michael Rodriguez. When I called Mr. Rodriguez in February of this year and
Can you
explained,
just remind the audience who Mr. Michael Rodriguez?
Michael Rodriguez is the superintendent at the Department of Corrections at MCI Concord, yeah. And when I explained to him what was going on, his first reaction was, oh, okay, that doesn't sound good. I will stop hunting. And then when the hunting season started again this year, I called him again. He said, well, I looked a little bit more closely at the regulations, and I talked with legal counsel, and I got all the stakeholders involved, and there's nothing I can do about it. So what we're hearing is there's nothing he can do about it. There's nothing the environmental police can do about it. There's nothing the Concord police can do about it. So we're trying to find an answer.
I'm just, I think the question was, I thought the question was, if they were hunting within the 500-foot safety setback, that you'd call the police. Are you saying, because the environmental police do not have jurisdiction over MCI, they can't say whether there's hunting or not hunting. All they can do is enforce the laws on the books, and one of them is the 500-foot safety setback.
Well,
So
that's exactly my point. And I think I did answer the question. You had encouraged us to call the environmental police. My response was, we have done that. And their response was, we have no jurisdiction, and they referred us elsewhere. We got referred elsewhere, and then we referred elsewhere again. And that's why we're here tonight. We're really trying to figure out who's got the answer to this. You know, we perceive this as a serious safety concern. It's a populated area.
And there are a lot of children.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, come forward if you
Yeah.
like.
I just wanted to make a
And
comment.
just identify
Yeah.
yourself once again, just for the.
I'm Arthur Yajin, 115 Wright Road. Thank you very much. We got worried about this, and Mike and I ended up calling Mass Wildlife in Westboro and got the director's office, and finally went around and got the scoop. And the scoop is the only hunting is allowed, as Pat says, 500 feet, 150 feet. The only way you can disallow hunting is to persuade the proprietor to post no hunting signs. And the environmental police who come down there, Ian, I forget his name. You know Ian, you probably know him. But he said, we can do nothing unless no hunting signs are posted. And he said, yes, the only way that can be done is if the proprietor posts them.
Proprietor being the.
Michael, yeah. So then I asked Mass Wildlife in Westboro. They're the headquarters. I said, well, who's the proprietor? And they said, well, they took their time. I was on the phone with them for a half hour. They looked up the Concord assessor's map, and they looked up their own maps. They said the proprietor of that farmland, that little amount of farmland, not the larger 40 acres, but is, and also the larger 40 acres, but that particular land is under the proprietorship of Michael Rodriguez, the superintendent, and he and only he has the jurisdiction to post no hunting signs. So we're hoping, as Mike said, to try to see if, well, you'll have to see what you think after all of this, but, we were hoping that maybe you, as the officials of the town, could possibly get in touch with Michael Rodriguez and talk all of this over. Now, Mike and I and others can do that, but I don't think we have the clout that you folks might have. So, I don't know, am I putting that right, Mike?
Yeah.
I just want to ask, it sounds like we have two different conversations happening. You're interested in no hunting. on the entire parcel of land. And I'm hearing that with the safety rules in place that hunters have to abide by, you should be safe, pretty much, and that you're finding that hunters are encroaching in that line. So I'm wondering if, maybe working with Mass Wildlife, they can better demarcate where that line is, because if you're all the way out here and you're hunting, you're probably not at great risk of an impact to your homes, but you're concerned about this circle area, which is too close for comfort. And maybe there's a way to address the too close for comfort through the Mass Wildlife, signage or posting, or I don't know what Mass Wildlife can do, but I'm hearing, but your request is different. It's saying we should intervene on not our land or property to advocate for no hunting, and I'm not.
Yeah, in a way, I think we're together on that, but that would be a step in the right direction. But I'm saying, if you look at this map, see that this Garreau has no legal status.
Yeah.
This trail has no legal status, but it should. And if you mark 500 feet from here and here and here, it leaves a tiny little area in the middle that allows hunting. And you're going to tell the hunters, now, to be safe, we think you should stay right there. And, to me, it's just, as someone who grew up in a farming area, it's just, I think most farmers would say, no, that's not right.
Well, I appreciate you all bringing it to our attention. I'm not sure if we're gonna have a solution tonight. In fact, I'm pretty sure we're not. But I think it has, it's been an education for us, and it's an issue that I wasn't certainly aware of, and we'll see what we can do.
Actually, if you may, I kind of have a different perspective on this. Ann McWilliams, 196 Wright Road, next to the lovely Mike on the side that the hunting has been happening. I've lived there since about 1994, and the hunting has been happening since 1994. My husband's family were the original purchasers of the house, and that was back in 1970, and the hunting was happening back in 1970. From time to time, the hunters do get a little close, and we do get some bird shot on our roof, and at that point, we say, hey, you're too close. And so I think one solution is education all around. Educating the hunters, okay, these houses are here. Unfortunately, the situation they talked about that happened last year, it was, from what I understand, someone that was hunting from a boat from White Pond, either was a canoe or a rowboat or something like that, which was kind of a totally different area than is usually hunted on the farmland. Another concern I have is that throughout the years, MCI Concord has been good neighbors. Whenever we have had an issue, they've addressed it quickly, and so we want to make sure that we maintain that good relationship. And unfortunately, this path that people talk about being accessed all the time is on MCI property, and they do have the right to ban access to that path. Those are their lands, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. In the past, they have thought about closing it off from our use so that the prisoners can use the brook to go swimming. Fortunately, that didn't go through. But I think it's beneficial to see if we can come up with a solution that works for everyone. And I think the first step is to work with MCI Concord when someone is getting the written permission to hunt on the land, to make sure that they know exactly where the boundaries are. I would love to have signs posted, but once again, that's difficult because it is farmlands and they are working the corn. So I don't think that they'll be amenable to signs being stuck in the middle of their crops where they need to go through. But there are roads, like paths in there, and maybe if we can have stuff posted there. So that's just my perspective on things, because it's legal. State law says they can do it.
I would just like to say that when I talked with Mr. Rodriguez, he was very helpful. So no one wants to go down that path where we're disrupting relationships with our good neighbors. And in fact, he sent me a lot of information in the mail, which was very helpful. I mean, look, I think if we're going to close with the theme really is, are there reasonable areas to hunt? And are there areas where if you started from scratch and said, should we allow hunting here? The answer would probably be no, because it's a very populated, very popular area, and that trail is extremely popular. And there are children, and they're scared.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So we are ready now.
Mr. Chairman, may I just add one more comment? I'm Terry Ackerman from the Community Preservation Committee, and I'm not speaking for the committee, but I just happen to be here tonight, and I'm a little concerned that I'm not sure what I'm looking at the map, but it looks like the Giroux property and the rail trail are abutting this hunting land, if I'm looking at it correctly. So I just want to ask that any negotiations with the Mass Wildlife.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were done. I'm very sorry. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
We're not done yet.
I just want to ask that any discussion with Mass Wildlife and with the superintendent of MCI include signs 500 feet from the Giroux property, et cetera. I'm sure this is obvious.
That's not the regulation, and maybe from residential. Would be my
Right,
guess.
but if we're going to be having trails there and families walking on that land and swimming
That's
and,
not residential.
okay,
So there are trails
Yeah.
and walking paths on this current.
right. And it looks like they are closer than 500 feet from, if I'm looking at the maps.
We'll have to see, I don't know what the regulation is.
Right.
500 foot from the residential. Yeah.
And 150 feet from a state highway.
So it's not gonna.
Well, it's something that we're going to have to consider for safety, not solve
Yeah,
tonight,
no,
but yeah.
that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons that we wanted to put this on the agenda
Right.
is because Concord, they now does own that land.
Right.
So it is an issue. And I think the information we've been provided, hopefully everybody in town watches the show and will be informed.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate you coming out tonight.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Good job. Well said. Well said. Thank you.
Do you want to talk about this, or is that it?
Well, I'm certainly happy to talk about I'm not sure exactly what we can do. I do think we can move forward perhaps on the notion that it somehow signifies where the
Well, I think number one, we should be able to get a straight, definitive answer as to who has responsibility for determining whether hunting is allowed on this property or not.
It's my understanding that the Mass Wildlife folks have jurisdiction over wildlife management areas, so there are multiple, and this is not one of them.
Right.
So currently, the local custodian of the land, MCI Concord, allows hunting, could prohibit it, but currently allows it.
Well-
And I think my sense is it's been going on for many years. I think some employees that work there do some of the hunting. I don't know if that's been a past practice. But I think that he's reluctant, I think, to close it off. I think it's maybe contrary to state policy to.
Well, but I think that we heard from the neighbors, so I get that concern. But the other two concerns is we have a rail trail going through here, and that Giroux land is now something that the town owns. So if there was a safety issue to begin with, it certainly hasn't been reduced by the presence of the rail trail and now our ownership of the Giroux. So I would suggest that, I don't know who, but you or Tom or somebody set up a meeting to go talk to the superintendent over there.
He's very approachable.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about him, but to say, well, there's this issue, and then on top of it, there's the rail trail and the Giroux land. I mean,
Yeah, and the delegate has posted all the conservation land as no hunting, so it's clear where the conservation is, and I imagine we would expect to post the Giroux property as no hunting on the property. It's not the 500-foot setback, but we would post it accordingly. And it seems like there are some things, so that if the tree line is 300 feet from residence, not 5, you could post the tree line at least to say 300 feet from residence, and then people know they need to be a couple hundred feet.
Who has jurisdiction or responsibility for any posting?
I would guess it's Mass Wildlife.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's what.
But I thought this wasn't, this land didn't fall under
They're
their.
managing it for rates.
My understanding is it would be DOC if the Department of Corrections determines that they really don't want to have hunting here, or they want to restrict it.
Well, even if they want to have it, we heard from folks tonight that maybe there could be some delineation, a clear delineation at 500 feet.
Well, that's why they offer,
They offer
signs
to-
available.
But do they have jurisdiction
Yeah,
to do that?
I think they have the cooperation of the Department of Corrections. They will work with the Department of Corrections to post the limits so that everybody's happy, that the neighbors are happy, the hunting continues.
Well, I'd really like either you or Tom to go meet with the superintendent.
Right.
We can make.
See what, you know.
Because it, to the point you're making, I would imagine that after a sit down, there might be a meeting of the minds
Yeah.
just over, I mean, we see a lot of problem right here. We haven't had that conversation about, you know, now let's look at the land under different management, approaches. And does your time honored practice still make sense in the same space?
Where do the hunters park?
I think on the side of Route 2. I think I've seen cars. There's not that many. It's not hundreds and hundreds of them. I think
And
it's-
if they're MCI,
they may be.
Use the MCI lot.
yeah.
And we've heard, I mean, on the West Concord Advisory Committee, I've received many reports of people who were running that route and who've run into different, hunting practices. So, look, I mean, you know,
So,
it exists.
my thought here is, we have to learn to coexist.
Yes.
Hunting is a part of life, so is land conservation. Here's an area, I mean, we run into this with dogs.
Right.
You know, how to manage people and dogs. So if there's a way to let people know it's hunting season, wear orange. You know, that's our responsibility to know that when we walk in areas that are being
Are
hunted.
there those kind of signs in this
Well,
area?
that's what I was asking
I
them
mean-
for. Did they have an education program for communities? And the answer is
Wouldn't we have a
sound.
lot less turkeys if we had more coyotes? So, I mean, you know,
It hasn't seemed to work with the geese. My guess is
The
that the
geese
hunting,
won't eat
the
coyotes.
the
Coyotes
hunting
won't
has
eat
not
geese.
diminished the number of geese.
coyotes are too smart to only eat geese.
But I think your point is really well taken. I mean, what I heard is hunters have to wear orange, but I also heard people should wear orange. I've never
Bright
thought
colors.
about, I've thought about bright colors biking,
Yeah.
but I haven't thought about it. It's just an extension.
So happy. I grew up, I spent years in Wisconsin, and we never go out into the woods or walk in on any trails during hunting season without bright orange. You wore hunter's orange, just as a precaution.
Yeah,
I don't hunt.
okay.
Well, we'll get something
So
set
we'll
up
figure out
and
whether it is.
might even include the,
Put together some sort of.
our state, well, and also, I was gonna say the new state rep might be educational and she's got some authority over MCI.
Well, there's buses too,
Sure.
So,
right on the active market.
learning, but it was an interesting.
Yeah, I thought you were also going to say you were going to include representative from the wildlife that was here tonight. You know, it just might be helpful.
In discussing it with the superintendent and
Yes,
the prison.
yeah, so that you have,
Well, our issue is public safety.
Yeah,
so
Right.
yeah.
Not,
but
The
that,
hunter, not the hunt is not the issue.
yeah.
It's how to hunt
but
safely.
I was thinking of the posting aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then you have all the people in the room at the same time. Yeah. Instead of going back and forth.
Good idea. Public comments. Seeing none.
Excellent.
Committee liaison reports from 1 week ago.
I had two additional, I had another CPC meeting, they're continuing with hearing their the applications defended by the applicants, and, you know, as always, do an excellent job with their questions and due diligence. Had another meeting with the Concord Housing Authority. They were asked by Liz Russ from Rizzo Regional Housing Services to confirm that should there be an opportunity for the house lot on the Giroux land, would they be interested? They did confirm that. And qualifying, you know, if everything was in order and could access money and so forth. And they were also asked to confirm their interest, potential interest in the Emerson land. If Emerson land were purchased and the town approved that, there would be potential access to existing Concord Housing Authority land, and they have the opportunity to build additional units on that land. And they did confirm their interest in that if all the pieces fell in place.
So they would be interested in building on land, but they don't want to be a partner in purchasing land.
They weren't asked to be a partner in purchasing the land.
They have, on the existing lot where they have three duplex units, they may have room for one or two more, but they have no access down that roadway. So that if the town acquires the pumpkin field, I think it's called, which is floodplain, can't be built upon, they would be hopeful to acquire the access rights to their own land out back. Is that, so they're saying that
they
like
have
to see
land. They
that.
have land they can't get to.
Right, because they built 3 units in the front, and they could build more in the back, but they have no access, they can't really, it wouldn't be convenient to drive through the existing development, so if they could access it through the ice house road, the dirt road or the ice road, they'd be interested in that.
And the land is not, the remaining land is not in the floodplain. And then, and I also thought the meeting at the League of Women Voters that Tom referenced on the topic of affordable housing was well attended by representatives from our various housing committees and staff in town, Marcia and so forth. So that was a helpful meeting.
There were about 40 to 50 people.
Yeah, a lot of interest.
I've heard a lot of positive, I wasn't at it, but I've heard a lot of people referencing it. It's a great discussion.
And that concludes mine.
I attended the trustees of town donation meeting where the major business item was a presentation by the firm that manages the accounts, Mellon Bank. That was a primary agenda item for that. Shall I talk about?
Yes, please.
So your subcommittee.
Procurement subcommittee.
The town manager search subcommittee, consisting of Alice and myself, met for our very first official meeting. Got a lot accomplished. We believe today the RFPs went out to 5 firms with experience in search. They are due back in, I believe it is the 19th at the end of business. The subcommittee will be meeting at 7 o'clock that evening to discuss and hopefully arrive at finalists for the consulting firm. And then the week of November 26th, which is the following week after Thanksgiving, the town manager search committee will have its first meeting on the 26th. And that will be an organizing meeting, get to know each other a little bit. We have to elect officers, that kind of stuff. And then that week will be the week that we interview the finalists, and hopefully we'll make a decision in a timely fashion. And then I'm forgetting, but I think it's December 17th. I think that's right, but somewhere in that neck of the woods, I guess I should look it up, is the first official meeting of, not the second official meeting of the search committee, where our hope would be that we would have, 17th at 7 p.m., we would have the consulting firm join us and we would begin to plan our work. So that's that. And then you mentioned we had a very nice ceremony here. Tom did a great job representing the select board with our friends from Denai. And I had, you recall that I've been meeting on occasion with business folks, and it had been suggested, so I went and I met with the assistant town manager in Lexington, Carol Pulowski, I think is her name, who used to, in Concord, I learned, anyway, about how they deal with tourism. So it's just an interesting meeting. I learned some things. I'll share them with Chris and Kate. So that's all I have.
I did not have any committee meetings, so nothing to report as liaison. Found myself still fairly busy with all things going on. But,
And I missed the HDC meeting. I was away for work and other related issues. But I did want to report that there's been, I really want to compliment the HDC on the extensive outreach they're doing they're working on the expansion of the historic district's area in Concord Center. And they have taken this on incredibly seriously. It started with a survey that was put out to all the neighbors, and they're individually calling every single home. So this isn't being left to, participation, opt-in participation. There's active engagement, and I just think that this is I think they should be commended for that level of public outreach, because I think that that's the sort of active engagement that a lot of the responses I've heard from people about, or sometimes criticisms about the way public process runs. You could not be more open and engaging in a public process, I don't believe, than this. So I don't want to tip the hand to some of the responses yet, because they haven't been published officially or discussed, I believe, and I look forward to being there when they are.
I was lucky enough to host someone from Japan this past week. It was a great experience for us and a lot of activities. It's very interesting to be able to have a conversation with somebody sentence at a time using Google Translate. So, I talk to my phone, he reads my phone, he responds with his phone, I read his phone, and some of the translations
Oh my God.
just hilarious. And one of the best lines was he cooked for us a wonderful Japanese dinner. He wanted to go to a supermarket to buy some food. And he was asking about ingredients, so the translation came, do they sell inconvenience at the supermarket? They usually give that away. But I do have a number of gifts for the select board and town staff, so I'd like to offer gifts from the night.
Are they under $50?
These were, yes. So these are
Thank you
gifts
for
from,
putting that on the record.
from the delegation that were left with me for distribution to the select board and town staff. It's an assortment of papers and interesting keychains. I'm not sure what some of these others are, but fun little things from Japan. Wow. So because of our visit, I missed my meetings this week.
What was an inconvenience?
I don't know.
Well, we're ready, I guess, now for miscellaneous correspondence. Don't know if anybody had any.
Seems like we went through it.
Yeah, I think that was,
Yes.
I think I would call that item 6 on the agenda.
And I guess we are ready for committee nominations.
Okay, I nominate Jerry Wedge of 109 Eastbridge Road to the Concord Center Cultural District Committee.
And we're ready for committee appointments.
Move to appoint William Rochek of 64 Rollingwood Lane and Jim Richardson of 228 Hunters Ridge Road to the Personnel Board for terms to expire May 31st, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yay, I know the personnel committee working.
Committee reappointments.
Move to reappoint Michael Lawson of 1695 Lowell Road and Wally Johnston of 1479 Main Street to the Financial Audit Advisory Committee for terms to expire May 31st, 2019.
We have a second. Linda?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Now we have confirm the town manager appointment.
Okay, we'll move to confirm town manager appointments for Bob Shatton of 116 Indian Spring Road to the Comprehensive Sustainable Energy Committee. Actually, it's the Concord Sustainability and Energy Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2021. And Cheryl Robertson as Deputy Collector/Treasurer for a term to expire May 31st, 2019.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're now,
Election officers.
yes.
We move to appoint election officers as listed on the town clerk's memo dated November 5th, 2018.
Second?
Do I need to read them or don't?
No. All in favor? Aye. And now we are ready to adjourn to executive session.
So I move to adjourn to executive session for purposes of discussing land acquisition, the White Pine Plan, and to not reconvene in open session. The executive session is needed to protect strategy discussions affecting litigation on the stated matter.
Do a roll call vote.
Discussion of the matter.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you all.
And thank you.
What are you doing?
Congratulations.